A single gunshot should echo down the street, yet in Nazi-occupied Europe, one weapon turned silence into terror. British commandos needed an answer to Churchill's impossible order: set Europe ablaze, but leave no sound behind. Their best suppressed pistols still roared like a jackhammer through city walls, dooming any covert attack. So why did spies risk everything on a clumsy pipe barely resembling a firearm? Beneath the rust and rubber wrap lies the story of the Wellrod, the most terrifyingly effective assassin's tool of the war. What made this ugly British invention change the fate of clandestine operations? And how close did Europe come to being ruled by fear alone? In 1941, Winston Churchill delivered a blunt order to his newly formed Special Operations Executive: set Europe ablaze. The SOE's mission was clear: sabotage, subversion, and targeted killings across Nazi-occupied territory. But the reality for agents on the ground was anything but simple. Each mission demanded a way to eliminate enemies without drawing a crowd or triggering a manhunt. The standard tools of silent killing, knives, garrotes, and poisons were fraught with risk. Using a knife or wire meant getting close enough to grapple with a uniformed officer or a well-armed collaborator. Poison could be unpredictable, slow, or easily detected. Even the best suppressed pistols of the day were a liability. Their reports echoed through city blocks, loud enough to bring soldiers running from neighbouring apartments or alert a patrol half a street away. The SOE's operational doctrine stressed stealth above all else. Agents moved through cities where a single mistake could mean torture or execution. They needed a weapon that could guarantee a kill in a crowded stairwell, a narrow alley, or a smoke-filled cafe, without a single bystander realising what had happened. No conventional firearm could offer that. Suppressed Sten guns and pistols still roared like machinery. Their noise, though less than an unsuppressed shot, was unmistakable in the quiet of a European night. The risk was not just detection, but the collapse of entire resistance networks if an operation went wrong. Field agents reported again and again that every assassination attempt with conventional weapons felt like a gamble. The moment a shot rang out, escape routes vanished. German counterintelligence swept entire neighbourhoods in search of a single gunman. The stakes were personal and immediate. A failed mission meant not only death for the agent, but reprisals against families and entire communities. The SOE's strategic vision, destabilising the Nazi war machine from within, depended on the survival of these agents and the secrecy of their actions. Churchill's directive left no room for compromise. The need was urgent and absolute. A weapon was required that could deliver death at arm's length, in silence, and then vanish with its operator into the city's shadows. The search for such a tool forced British engineers to abandon the conventions of firearms design and approach the problem from an entirely new angle. For the men and women risking their lives behind enemy lines, the difference between a muffled shot and a true whisper was not theoretical. It was the boundary between life and death, success and disaster. Measured in the field, the so-called silent weapons of World War II were anything but. The suppressed Sten gun, the standard issue for British commandos and resistance fighters, produced a blast of around 130 decibels. That is the same as a jackhammer tearing up pavement, impossible to miss in the echoing alleys and stairwells of occupied cities. Suppressed pistols fared little better, registering between 120 and 160 decibels depending on the model and ammunition. Even with the best technology available, the sharp crack of a gunshot pierced the night, carrying through stone walls and down entire blocks. Urban tests at the time revealed the problem in stark terms. A suppressed Sten fired in a closed room could be heard through brick and plaster up to 50 metres away. In the dense multi-storey neighbourhoods of Paris, Copenhagen or Warsaw, that meant a single shot could alert dozens of people, neighbours, sentries, and Gestapo patrols alike. The supposed advantage of a suppressor evaporated in environments where sound travelled through floors, courtyards, and narrow streets. Agents in the field described the dilemma in practical terms. A suppressed weapon might confuse the direction of a shot, but it never hid the fact that a shot had been fired. The difference between a muffled gunshot and a fully unsuppressed blast was academic when the goal was to slip away unnoticed. In the quiet hours before dawn, even a 120 decibel report cut through the background noise, drawing attention as surely as a shout. Escape routes depended on silence, not just confusion. The limitations were not lost on the engineers tasked with supporting covert operations, and numbers set a hard boundary. If a weapon could be heard through walls at 50 meters, it could never be used for a truly secret kill in a crowded building. The challenge was no longer about making a gun quieter. It was about making it disappear acoustically. This was the standard set for the next generation of clandestine arms. Anything above the ambient hum of a city street would betray the operator, and by extension, the entire resistance network. The problem was now a matter of physics, not just tactics. Major Hugh Reeves approached the problem of true science with the mind of an engineer, not a gunsmith. At Station 9 in Welwyn Garden City, he broke the challenge into its most basic elements. Every gunshot, he argued, was not a single noise but a combination of 3 distinct sounds. The violent blast of hot propellant gases escaping the muzzle, the crack of a bullet breaking the sound barrier, and the mechanical clatter of the gun's action. Each source needed its own solution, and only by addressing all 3 could a weapon become truly covert. The first enemy was the gas blast. Standard pistols and submachine guns vented a burst of high-pressure gas the instant a bullet left the barrel, producing a sharp, unmistakable report. Reeves designed a barrel drilled with a series of small ports, 16 to 20 along its length, each one bleeding off hot gas into a surrounding expansion chamber before it could erupt from the muzzle. This chamber, wrapped around the barrel itself, gave the gas space to cool and lose pressure. By the time what remained reached the end of the tube, most of its energy was spent. The gas was tamed before it could announce the shot. Beyond the expansion chamber, Reeves introduced a labyrinth of steel baffles and rubber wipes. 18 thin metal discs, each with precisely sized holes, forced the gas to weave through a maze, slowing, cooling, and dispersing it further. Interleaved among them, 3 rubber washers formed nearly airtight seals. When a bullet punched through, the rubber snapped closed behind it, trapping the last traces of gas. These wipes were consumable, good for only a dozen or so shots before losing their effectiveness. But the trade-off was worth it. Each shot sounded less like a gun and more like a dull thump, easily lost in the ambient noise of a city street. The second challenge was the supersonic crack. In a conventional 9mm pistol, the bullet leaves the barrel at around 350 meters per second, well above the speed of sound. That velocity creates a miniature sonic boom, a sharp whip-like snap that can be heard far beyond the immediate area. Reeves solved this by combining the ported barrel with a carefully reduced powder charge, bringing the bullet's speed down to roughly 290 meters per second. This kept the projectile subsonic, eliminating the shockwave entirely. The result was a weapon that did not betray itself with the telltale crack of a high-velocity round. The third and final source of noise was mechanical. Most pistols use a semi-automatic action, cycling the slide and ejecting the spent cartridge with each shot. This sequence of impacts and springs is surprisingly loud, especially in confined spaces. Reeves rejected this entirely. The Wellrod employed a simple bolt action system. After firing, the operator would manually unlock, pull back, and recock the bolt before chambering the next round. This slow, deliberate movement could be timed for moments when ambient noise was highest, or delayed until the shooter was safely away. No slide, no clatter, no giveaway metallic sound. Through this systematic approach, Reeves created a weapon that was more than just quiet. It was engineered for invisibility. Each technical choice, from the ported barrel to the bolt-action mechanism, addressed a specific acoustic threat. The Wellrod was not simply a silenced pistol, it was the product of a checklist, each item ticked off in the pursuit of perfect stealth. For agents operating under occupation, this was not a matter of convenience, but of survival. A calibrated sound meter sits in the centre of the room, its sensor poised to capture the smallest acoustic signature. The first pistol on the bench is the Walther PPK, a familiar shape in the world of clandestine operations. The engineer's hand is steady as the trigger is pulled. The meter's needle leaps, 115 decibels. That is the sound of a subway train barreling through a station, a noise that slices through concrete, glass, and the hush of midnight apartments. The waveform on the monitor is jagged, a sharp vertical spike that dwarfs the city's ambient hum. Even with a suppressor, the PPK's report is a warning flare, unmistakable and impossible to ignore. Next comes the high-standard HDM, the American answer to the problem of silent shooting. The shot is fired. The meter records 90 decibels. The waveform is smaller but still distinct, a metallic pop crisp and clear, cutting through the layered sounds of distant traffic and muffled voices. The HDM's reputation for quiet is well earned, but the numbers tell a more nuanced story. At close range, its sound is still a presence, still a risk. The waveform stands out, a clear signal above the city's noise floor. Then the Wellrod. The engineer cycles the bolt by hand, chambers around and aligns the barrel. The trigger is pressed. The sound is almost an afterthought. 73 decibels at the muzzle. The meter barely stirs. On the waveform, the spike is modest, rounded, nearly lost in the baseline. For context, a car door slamming just a few meters away can reach the same level. The difference is not just a matter of numbers, but of consequence. At 10 meters, the Wellrod's shot is swallowed by the city's living soundtrack. Footsteps on pavement, a cough behind a window, the distant rumble of engines. The same test with the PPK or the HDM overlays a distinct impulsive peak that rises above the ambient line. The Wellrod's trace, by contrast, is almost invisible, blending seamlessly into the background. This silence was the point. The lab setup is meticulous. The sound meter is placed at 1 meter, then at 10 meters, each distance precisely marked. At 1 meter, the Wellrod's 73 decibel reading is already merging with the room's natural hum. At 10 meters, with the typical clatter of urban life, traffic, voices, the creak of pipes, the shot vanishes entirely. The waveform overlay reveals the truth. The Wellrod's acoustic signature slips beneath the city's noise floor, while the PPK and the HDM remain visible, their peaks cutting through the static. Engineers dissect the data. A standard suppressed pistol, even at 120 decibels, can be heard through brick and plaster at 50 meters, enough to alert anyone within earshot. The Wellrod's peak is so low and so brief that it disappears into the background, unnoticed and unremarked. For agents in occupied cities, this was not a technical curiosity. The gulf between 73 and 115 decibels was the difference between slipping away unseen and triggering a manhunt. The Wellrod's acoustic profile, proven by numbers and confirmed in the field, gave resistance fighters a weapon that redefined what silence could mean. In the arithmetic of survival, quiet was more than a feature, it was the edge that kept them alive. Viewed from a distance, the Wellrod barely resembled a weapon at all. Its long, featureless tube measured just over 14 inches, with almost 2/3 of that length dedicated to the suppressor. The barrel and baffle assembly formed a seamless cylinder, broken only by a simple front blade and a shallow rear notch, rudimentary sights that left little room for error at any distance. Instead of a traditional grip, the Wellrod's handle was a detachable magazine wrapped in thick-ribbed rubber. With the magazine removed, the rest of the assembly looked more like a piece of plumbing than a firearm, an intentional disguise for agents who might need to abandon or conceal the weapon in a hurry. There was no trigger guard to snag on clothing, no ornate markings or exposed mechanisms. Every detail served a single purpose: to make the Wellrod as unobtrusive and practical as possible for close-range use. The magazine held 6 rounds in the original 9mm version and up to 8 in later 32 ACP models. Effective range peaked at about 23 meters, but the real design intention was far closer. The recessed muzzle and indented cap allowed the operator to press the barrel directly into a target's clothing or body, muffling the shot even further. In a dark hallway or crowded cafe, the Wellrod's plain pipe-like form was both its camouflage and its calling card. Production of the Wellrod began under a veil of secrecy in late 1942, with the first units assembled at Station 9 before shifting to factories such as Birmingham Small Arms. Security at these sites was uncompromising. Workers signed strict non-disclosure agreements and many never knew what they were building. Every component was sanitized, no manufacturer's mark and no identifying features. The serial numbers, when present, followed no logical order. They were scattered deliberately, making it impossible to track output or trace a weapon's path from factory to field. Paperwork was kept to a minimum, and what little existed was routinely destroyed after shipments left the premises. Once packed, the Wellrods disappeared into the Special Operations Executive clandestine supply chain. Crates were routed through hidden storage depots and repackaged for airdrops by the Royal Air Force. These flights operated at night, often at low altitude, with crews briefed only on coordinates and coded drop signals. By early 1943, the first Wellrods reached resistance groups in Denmark, France and Norway. The weapon's journey from a guarded assembly line to the hands of an underground agent was as carefully concealed as its report in the field. In occupied Europe, the Wellrod's impact played out in moments that rarely left a trace. Maquis's fighters slipped through alleyways in Lyon, dispatching collaborators with a single muffled shot and vanishing before anyone noticed. In Paris, a target slumped in a crowded cafe, the report so faint that conversation barely paused. Danish resistance cells, armed through midnight drops, eliminated Gestapo informants in broad daylight. Holger Danske's operations left no warning, no alarm, only unanswered questions as German patrols arrived too late. Norwegian saboteurs used the Wellrod to quietly remove sentries before demolitions, the silence buying precious minutes to escape. But every advantage came with a cost. The Wellrod's rubber wipes, critical for true silence, wore out after just 10 to 15 shots. Each mission forced a calculation: how many rounds could be trusted before the weapon betrayed its purpose? Agents relied on a tool that could deliver perfect silence, but only for a handful of lives. After that, even the most ingenious design could not promise invisibility. In an age obsessed with smart weapons and digital surveillance, true silence remains more elusive than ever. The Wellrod's legacy endures, not just as a marvel of wartime engineering, but as a reminder that fear can be engineered as precisely as any machine. The tools of covert power still shape the shadows today. What we do not hear may matter most. Share your thoughts below.